There won't be many easy victories in this year's state Democratic primary, at least if the results of the party convention are any indication. Delegates from across Massachusetts met in Worcester over the weekend to endorse a slew of candidates for statewide office. In the race for governor, Attorney General Maura Healey took the majority, but nearly 30% of delegates went for State Senator Sonia Chang-Díaz, almost double the 15% she needed to make it onto the September primary ballot. In the race for Secretary of State, NAACP Boston President Tanisha Sullivan got the nod over seven-term incumbent Bill Galvin, who also easily cleared the primary threshold, so he'll once again be on the ballot as well. And those are just two of the many races to watch over the next several months. Joining me to break down some of them are GBH political reporter and host of Talking Politics, Adam Reilly, and Jacquetta Van Zandt, host of Politics and Prosecco videocast, and the former advisor of Framingham Mayor Yvonne Spicer. Welcome, y'all.
Hi, you too.
Thank you.
All right, so let's start with the governor's race here. And we were talking about Healey walked in as the presumptive winner of that race, but 30% went for Sonia Chang-Díaz, and not race, but the nomination there for Democrat in the convention here. I mean, was this a surprise that Chang-Díaz got this 30%?
Not for me. I think that it tells the story of the future of the party. So if 30% of those voters came out, those are probably going to be younger voters and more diverse group of voters as well, diverse thought group of voters. And so I think that you're going to see that's going to take over the party. The party right now is set up of a lot of people who've been in the game for a long time and already come in with incumbency on their mind. They are more focused on the incumbents or people who are already holding office. This new group of people, I think you're going to see, just as you've seen in the last local races, that they are focused on the person at hand, their brand, and the messaging that they've been putting out on the ground. So I'm not surprised that she took 30%.
I have a bit of a different take. I'm not surprised she got to 30 either, maybe slightly surprised that she did as well as she did. But Sonia Chang-Díaz has been saying for months now that she was confident she would get the 15% required to make the ballot. So there was reason to think that she would get there and get there comfortably. I don't know if getting to 30 changes the narrative that we've had in this race for a long time now, which is that Maura Healey is going to be the nominee, barring something completely unexpected happening. The Boston Globe played this as a result that reinforced Healey's frontrunner status. Again, I think, I wouldn't have been surprised if Chang-Díaz did a little bit worse. I'm not sure that she upended the way people have been viewing the race. And I also want to point out, I think that the two of them are presenting pretty different visions at this point in time. Healey, who was beloved by progressives going way back, is casting herself more as the candidate who's going to govern in the mold of Charlie Baker, more of a moderate approach. Now, some Healey fans out there watching are going to be angry. You can email me. Don't email the other people. But I think she's been making that pitch. Chang-Díaz is pushing herself as someone who is unapologetically to the left of Healey. And it's an open question whether Democrats want someone who's identifying themselves that way or whether, in fact, they want someone who's more Bakerish. And I think there might be reason to think it's the latter.
But I would, if I were advising Sonia, and I'm not advising Sonia or Maura, but that's how I would play out the rest of this campaign. I would bring new voters because that's what those people were who voted. Those are new voters, people who are newly engaged. I would make sure that those people are the ones that are coming out to vote and they're getting to the ballot. I wouldn't just focus on people that they're going to be, down the line Democrats. I'd be focused on bringing new voters into the fold.
Jax, that's a great point. And when you think back to how Governor Deval Patrick became Governor Deval Patrick, that's one of the things he did. He managed to pull these people to the polls who just weren't showing up. So it's a recipe for success if you can do it.
So when we're talking about this new energized voting base, though, that maybe Sonia Chang-Díaz is bringing into the race, how do you run knowing that you're not going to have the possibility of the win? It's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. It's like, is it just a setup for another race that you're running for?
Jax, you want to take a crack at that first, and I'll think of something?
I'm curious. As you know, as someone who works outside of politics, I'm thinking about how do you fundraise, you galvanize, you get all these people together. You're doing two jobs at once as state senator, because there are some big bills that are happening at the State House right now, right?
Right.
Is it a setup for a running again in a different time, in a different maybe place?
I'm sure her team will probably say, no, we're focused on the seat that we're running for. But I think that's a really smart take on it as well, Crystal, because for me, this is what you see in a lot of either very blue states or very red states. It's hard to run against someone who's already in office. It's hard to run against someone who's already popular, and you have to build a base. And that's really what Senator Chang-Díaz has to do. She has to build a new voter base. She cannot depend on the people who are true blue, because they are going to stick with the incumbency. That's what we do here in Massachusetts. It's sad because it doesn't make room for everyone. But I think that if I were Sonia, I would be thinking, okay, if I'm going to focus on this race, I am going to build out a new voter base and just turn it out.
It is a really interesting question to kick around, and I'm not privy to what's going on in Sonia Chang-Díaz's head, but Crystal, you're right. We do see this periodically where candidates who it seems clear from the outside probably aren't going to succeed keep telling everyone that they think they still have a shot. They keep sending out the fundraising pitches. I think that becomes hard. The more time goes on and the more it's not clear that you're gaining traction, getting people to give you the money that you need to keep running that campaign is difficult. Another challenge beyond what Jax just laid out that Chang-Díaz faces is in the governor's race, Democrats have been pining for Healey to run, going back to when Charlie Baker was going to be seeking re-election. They saw her as the one Democrat who could maybe beat Baker. That matchup never came to fruition. But as Jax said, she's running her first statewide campaign here. She's creating a whole network of potential supporters, potential donors, and she'll be able to draw on that in the future, whatever she does from here on out.
Yeah. Well, I had to ask that question, but let's talk about Tanisha Sullivan's speech, because I saw that as a standout moment of the convention, and we want to play a little bit of it.
This is not a job that gets done by filming PSAs. It requires active engagement. This office should be the soul and hold the promise of our democracy, serving as a reminder to each generation of our calling to manifest the hope, the dreams, and the beliefs of our ancestors. This office cannot settle for good enough. It must actively work for more.
I mean, when have you ever seen this race, Secretary of State race, being so exciting, right? And the upset with 7-term incumbent Bill Galvin here.
Listen, first of all, I'm always inspired by Tanisha Sullivan as a member of the NAACP, as a member of the Boston chapter in particular. She is a dynamic speaker. So I have no doubts in my mind that she killed that speech and she rocked it as she was supposed to. My fear is, because let's not forget, Josh Zakem also won the convention. And the party is supposed to get behind that candidate when they win. It is going to be incumbent on Tanisha's team to hold the party, the state party, accountable for those time, resources, and money so that she can keep that momentum. She went in with very little momentum because he was the incumbent, but she left that convention the front runner. And I think that's what she could bank on, but it's going to be her job and her team's job to hold the state party accountable for all that they're supposed to give you when you win the convention. That's my take.
I think the Zakem example is pretty interesting to kick around. Zakem beat Galvin 4 years ago at the convention, but he beat him by a smaller margin than Tanisha Sullivan did. And then, it needs to be said, Josh Zakem, former Boston City Councilor, he was a white man running against another white man in a moment when voting rights and the question of representation in politics had not become as hot button and important as they are today. So it's a very different landscape between that race and this one. However, that race did show that Bill Galvin has a staunch base of supporters. And those PSAs that Tanisha Sullivan hit him for recording all the time, they work. Voters have responded, at least some voters. I'm not sure we've seen the Democratic Party come out post-convention and say, all right, you're our endorsed candidate, and therefore we're going to do everything we can to help you and to take down the person who you beat. I'm not used to seeing that, so I would predict that that's not going to happen with the MassDems moving forward, at least until
That's
after
unfortunate.
the
That's the whole point of the convention.
Well, you got to say you're the endorsed candidate, right? You got
Yeah.
that on the ballot, but
Yeah. I also think, to me, I think it shows that Galvin is vulnerable. So this is the second time he's been at convention and he's lost to someone who has challenged him. 7 terms is too long. And I think it's time to make room for the new. And I think that's what you're going to see. I keep ringing this alarm about new voters, new diverse thought voters as well. Millennials and zillennials, they're no longer interested in your years of service. They want to see what's going to move things forward. And so I think you'll see that in this race. I think you'll see that in the midterms and on the local races that will be coming up.
can I just confess that's actually the first time I've heard the term zillennials ever, and that's what I'm going to call my kids now. So thank you.
Yes, it's the people right on the cusp.
There you go. That's right. I want to talk about the Attorney General race because it actually had to go to a second ballot. And here you had Andrea Campbell at 39%, Quentin Paul-Free at 39%, Shannon Liss-Reardon at 22%. Then at the second ballot, you had Quentin Paul-Free at 54% and Andrea Campbell at 46%. So this race, what I loved about this is the new faces that are getting into some of these statewide races. We know that Shannon Liss-Reardon and Andrea Campbell, both city councilors, and so now they're running for this statewide office. Lots of new faces that we saw at the convention this year.
Definitely. I'm most interested in this race just because the state of Black America is really at a crossroads with social justice, criminal justice reform. And so I think what I think our national party should be focusing on a lot are these attorney general races. We need people who are going to either, stand up and tell truth to power and also hold law enforcement accountable as well. But I think that I was a little disappointed that many people left the convention on the second ballot. And that's where maybe Andrea had lost a little bit of voters because she won that first ballot. But I also think, this is a good time if I were advising Andrea, and I'm not advising Andrea, but if I were advising Andrea, I would come out of this convention knowing, okay, there is a group of people out there who are listening to what I have to say. I need to kick it up a notch. I need to find out where that gap is and go out to those people and say, here is why it's important that I'm on the ballot, but not only that you come out to vote for me. So that would be my advice to her.
I want to try the advice thing too. I think that one thing we see from the result, and I agree that Jax is onto something in terms of people drifting away from the convention, not sticking around. That probably helped Pelfrey. But he's also been hammering Campbell critically again and again and again for having this super PAC that formed to support her when she ran for mayor of Boston. Last year, he has said repeatedly there are donors to this super PAC that may end up backing Andrea Campbell again, who you might want her regulating if she's the AG, and that's going to compromise her. We need to keep outside money out of this race. And to my eye and ear, the Campbell campaign has not yet come up with an effective rejoinder to that. There was one point where they tried saying that Pelfrey was trafficking in misinformation, but that didn't really make sense because his claims about possible conflicts of interest seem to be just factually there. I think she needs to come up with a better response than that and to do it pretty quickly because people's conception of this race has now changed.
And if I were Pelfrey, though, I really wouldn't hang all of my hats on that because Andrea does have a base. And, a lot of people can point to his record and say, well, where were you on this? How come you never said anything on this? So if I were him, I wouldn't go too hard. I would just run the race that I need to run, and I wouldn't do any low digs if I were him. And I'm not him, and I'm not advising. But I'm just saying that Quentin is going to have to, in my opinion, he's going to have to show his record, especially when it comes to standing up and for law enforcement. So I think he's got an uphill battle himself. And if I were him, I would focus on that.
So in the last couple minutes here, what else do people need to be paying attention in terms of these statewide races as we come out of this convention?
You know, the ones that we've talked about are definitely the most interesting to me, but it's worth reminding people we've got a race for lieutenant governor, too. Kim Driscoll, the mayor of Salem, ended up getting the party's endorsement in Worcester, but that's now a three-way race. And then we also have this race for state auditor pitting Chris Dempsey, who some people remember from No Boston Olympics, against Diana DeZoglio, the state senator. So those races are important as well. Any statewide race is important, but I don't know that in terms of natural drama, they don't pop quite the same way that the ones we've already talked about do. But that doesn't mean people shouldn't do their research.
Well, you know what they missed? They both missed on the convention is Tanisha got out there and talked about what the Secretary of State's office is supposed to do and what they are doing. I don't feel like either one of them, Chris or Diana, talked about what the auditor's office is supposed to do. When I think of auditing, I think about a little man in a gray suit with a briefcase at my door saying, I want to see all your receipts.
Maybe like a green
from
eye shade.
Talbot and Kohl's and Jack Rogers. We want to see all of those. But you don't know exactly what they're supposed to be doing and what they're supposed to handle. And they could take a really good lesson from Deb Goldberg. When she ran for treasurer, she talked about all the things that office was supposed to do and what she was going to bring to it.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Adam Reilly and Jacquetta Van Zandt, thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.